Hello, and welcome to the first pilot episode of the Name TBD podcast. I am one of your hosts, Noobzors, joined by my co-hosts Null03,
Hi there.
Sick Robot,
Hey, how you guys doing?
and Spleenface.
Hello, everyone.
So we're going to start off with just a round of introductions, giving a bit of detail and where we're from, and how we all met and why we're doing this podcast. So I'll start. We're all generally from the Toronto area, and Null, Spleen, and I we met from from Queen's University. There was a CDH scene that started there, and we played in paper at ANC in Toronto. So if anyone wants to come by for CDH nights, those are on Thursdays. But yeah, we're all from the Toronto scene. We play in different areas. I myself play on the cEDH Discord. That's over webcam, as well as at my at ANC for those games, and at Queens in the Magic Club. What would you know?
Yeah, so I'm known as Null. I go by Null03 on Reddit and Null04 on Tapto. As Noobs mentioned, I'm from the Toronto CDH crew, and I also do a lot of playtesting on Playtest V1 on Tapto. So these days I'm playing Teferi as kind of my competitive deck, and otherwise I'm in the fringes playing Thrasios, Val Smasher, Divergent Control. That's it for me.
Sick.
Hey guys, I'm Sick Robot on the CDH Discord, Sick Robot on the subreddit. Play a whole bunch of 4-color Flash Hulk, like the degenerate that I am. I also have primers up on Tapped Out for Viral's Protein Hulk combo and Momer Vig Hackball combo. So check those out. Yeah, just currently, grinding ranked on the CH Discord, getting it up there, putting the decks on the map, hanging out.
Oh, yeah, I should also interject that, yeah, so Sick is playing on the CDH Discord, and that's primarily a trice on cockatrice, and then the cEDH Discord is it also has a ranked system, but that's over webcam. Also, I didn't mention, again, which decks I'm playing. I mainly play Gitrog, but I also play Shimmers, and a Anafenza Stacks deck. And back to Spleen.
Hi, I'm Spleen. As mentioned before, I met
Spleen
Noobs
Face.
and Null.
Yeah.
Spleen Face, yeah. I met Noobs and Null at school, where we played a lot in paper. I also play in Toronto on Thursdays at ANC, and I have played a bit both on cEDH and on competitive EDH, but I'm cursed, so games never fire when I'm online. I play Kess Storm, and I've been working on a Muldrow deck that has seemed to be performing reasonably well, but I don't know, it's a little bit memey. And I also just brew random jank decks every couple weeks or so. So my most recent is Estrid Chainmail Stacks, but
Nice.
Yeah. Some style points with that deck.
Oh yeah.
For sure. Okay, so with the goal of this podcast is that we wanted to just provide more podcasting content in CDH, because there's many video creators out there right now, but there's definitely a lack of podcasts going on, or at least the current podcasts are coming out once a month. So if we want to create a podcast that would, we can discuss things going on in the CDH community, as well as new brews, card discussions, but then to provide people with more regular content. So the structure of the show is going to be we're going to have segmented show, nothing too original, but the segments will be, we're going to have an introduction section, and we're going to cover new developments in the community and CDH generally. Then we're going to be going into topics. So we've got topic 1 through, however many topics we have laid out for that show. And then finally, listener questions. Okay, so on to the specific topics we're going to cover in this episode. We're going to, in new developments, We've got some talk about the recent CDH tournament on cockatrice that was held for $100 prize. We're going to talk about the new Flash Hulk pile that was brought up over a Reddit post and has spawned quite the new brew. And we're going to talk about some Guilds of Ravnica cards that we think are going to make an impact in CDH. So let's just jump right into new developments then.
Yeah. Let's go over the tourney, I guess.
Okay.
Make that happen.
If only we had a nice like intro for like a nice like segment. What is it? What are they? Like songs or jingles? That'll be hype.
Gotta get our theme music game for next time.
We'd have to have talent for that though.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oof. Severe lack of talent here.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
So we talked about like I mentioned, there was a tournament hosted by I Sleep Too Late, where he put up $100 for a CDH tournament hosted over cockatrice, and as it turns out, 2 of our hosts actually made it into the finals of that pod. So why don't you guys talk about the tournament?
Yeah, Canada represent. Canada too strong, really. Yeah, I mean, tournament was actually pretty cool in my opinion. I don't know about Spleen, but for me, it seemed like it ran pretty smoothly compared to tournaments that have happened in the past.
Everything seemed to go pretty well. Rounds were definitely a lot faster. There was less waiting around, it seemed, than maybe some previous ones. So great job to I Sleep Too Late and all the team that he had working on it. Yeah,
hands down, good stuff. I just really appreciate the fact that we didn't have to play much 3DH. That was one of my biggest complaints from the last tourney, and that pretty much got solved through combination of seeding and setting up buys. So, yeah.
So, what did you guys? What decks did you guys take into that tournament?
So I brought my 4-color flashlight pile, named definitely not Virals or 4-color Virals. Basically, just sort of called like Sacrifice Hulk, where you play a bunch of sacrifice outlets alongside like the flashlight pile, and then you can use the sacrifice outlets alongside cards like Pattern of Rebirth or Natural Order to get Hulk directly onto the field and then sacrifice it and kill people that way.
And you're definitely not Viral's pile. What's the standard pile for that? What's the standard win condition there?
So it used to be the good old trusty Mike Ball pile with my Chaos and Walking Ballista, but there's a pile that came up about a month and a bit ago, with Malira Silvok Outcast, with Safehold Elite, strangely enough, and Blood Artist. So basically how it works is Malira plus Persist Creature, same thing as like, old Birthing Pod decks and modern or current like company decks, where whenever you sacrifice a Persist Creature with Malira on the board, it comes back, and it comes back without a 1/1, without a -1/-1 counter. But you can just keep doing it. And when you have a Sack-O-Let and a Blood Artist on the board as well, you just get to ping people to death.
And
which is
so that's with you get the one. You can get that all in one pile if you have a sack outlet in play, but with no outlet, you're going to need to get an outlet with your first pile. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. You can do pretty much anything for it. My card of choice is Body Snatcher, but you can use stuff like Karmic Guide, Body Double, pretty much anything that can copy a Hulk that's already in the grave, so that you can fit that extra 1 CMC creature into your pile.
Nice. And how did you do going through Swiss?
I believe I went 1 and 2, might have been 2 and 2. Just wrecked my first pod pretty hard. Just went turn 3 win. I think I dropped a couple of games and then 1-1 in semis to get into the finals pod.
Nice. Spleen, what did you take into the tournament?
So I took Muldrow, and so that's a deck where you use Muldrow to just break parity by returning stacks pieces and advantage pieces over and over again, or just play Zeres Weirding, and then everyone has no idea what to do because that card just makes games absurd. Yeah. And it uses the win condition is to try and get Animate Dead, Phantasmal Image, and Lion's Eye Diamond with Muldrow, and then you can loop that to generate infinite mana, infinite storm, and play any number of permanent cards from your graveyard, which usually translates into a win, either through something like Walking Ballista, or trying to find Bitter Ordeal, or playing Winds of Rebuke a lot to mill everyone out.
Just insert WinCon here.
Yeah, insert WinCon here. Preferably permanent based, because Lion's Eye Diamond does make you discard your hand, and Muldrow only lets you play permanents. But you can find things like Eternal Witness if you absolutely have to.
So for our listeners who may be versed in CDH, Muldrow isn't exactly a deck that comes up very often. It seems to be quite a bit more fringe, even though it's in this tournament it made it to the finals pod, and in the last tournament I believe you made it to the semis.
Yeah, that's right. It's definitely a weird deck to play, and it will struggle. It struggles against sort of the stereotypical view of a pod of 4, really fast combo decks like Thrasios Tymna Flash Hulk or similar things, or Selvala, because in the early game it doesn't necessarily have the tools to answer everything. But when there's another sort of slower deck at the table, then it really starts to shine, because if you don't lose in the first few turns, you can start to lay things out, and then going from there, Muldrow just provides such an incredible amount of mana once you get to 6 mana and actually cast her. An incredible amount of advantage. So if the game goes long, your odds of winning just go up and up and up.
So
yeah, I think.
Oh yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I think Muldrow is a great example of what we like to call parasitic decks.
Yeah.
Not in a bad way, but just as a descriptor where a parasitic deck is really, the whole point of the deck is that it's not particularly great in every meta, or maybe even a majority of metas, but it is built to do very well in specifically one meta. So, like Muldrow, there are a lot of parasitic decks. Same thing with like Nath of the Gilt Leaf, or like Marin, commanders like that, where you're really taking advantage of there being another deck at the table to do some of the dirty work for you, and sort of get the game to go on a bit longer, so that you can just start laying down fat mid-range cards and just gaining a bunch of advantage.
Yeah, so we mentioned, Spleen mentioned Zeres Weirding, and I spectated, I think, 2 of the games. I spectated the finals pod and this Spleen semi-game leading right up to that. And Zeres Weirding did quite a lot of work in that semi-game. So just for people who don't know, because that, first of all, Muldrow being a niche CDH commander, and Zeres Weirding being an even more niche card, what exactly does Zeres Weirding do?
Okay, so Zeres Weirding is a card that's it's a 4-mana enchantment, cast for 3 and a blue, and it says players play with their hands revealed, which already completely reshapes the game. Knowing what sort of interaction people have, that amount of information, lets you know when it's safe to try and do things, when it's not safe. And if you see that it's not safe, you might not try, which means everyone could be sitting on their win conditions, stopped by one counterspell, because whoever goes first knows it's not going to get through. But then the second effect that really, really plays with the game, it says whenever a player would draw a card, instead they reveal it, then any player may pay 2 life. If they do, you put that card into their graveyard. Otherwise, they draw the card. So what that means is you can stop your opponents from drawing any relevant cards at the cost of 2 life a card, which in a 4-player 40 life format is pretty much nothing.
Yeah, seems pretty strong.
And I'd like to add one more thing. People have already been brewing with the card Telepathy, which is the first half of Zeres Weirding. So it kind of, for Muldrow, forms 2 incredibly important functions. One of which is
that's
card
true.
that people have already
that's
been brewing.
true.
Okay.
The one thing with telepathy, I'm just gonna sneak in one more point here. The one thing with telepathy effects, I think that a lot of people have realized is that either intentional or not, in sort of a fast pod, it can happen where the only thing keeping a fast player from attempting a win is like the threat of a counter spell, and then like you sometimes it just ends up happening, and this is like pretty much any other card where it's just like some of the time you just reveal everyone's hands and it's just like, oh, there's no interaction.
I'm just free to combo.
Someone was bluffing it, and you just sort of like remove all possibility of bluffing, which is really good in some cases, but like really bad in some other cases. But yeah, I mean, like, just I think the draw denial and the fact that you can break parity on it is just so good anyway that is probably just like so much more worth it.
That's the absolutely backbreaking part there, right? You get to see, oh, do I really want to let that Gitrog player draw this demonic tutor? You know, probably not. And
in a meta full of Tymnas too, just like being able to deny that extra draw, and if like you have like any like sort of like incidental life gain, it can just be really powerful.
Absolutely. So one more thing I wanted to just briefly ask you guys about before we move on from this topic is what were some of the decks that you were seeing running through Swiss semis, and then actually I also want to talk about the finals game, which was quite a roller coaster ride.
a bit of a game of ping pong.
Yeah. So before we get to that, wow, what were you guys seeing in Swiss? What were some of the other decks? Anything stand out?
So I was seeing a bit of like the generic like slow stacks builds that I mean like my deck's sort of built to take advantage of, right? Like if you're not interacting with me by turn 3, then there's a pretty good chance I can just win the game. Not a couple of those, but in like going through Swiss and then getting into semis, the sort of difficulty of winning a game really got ratcheted up a couple of notches.
I think I
ended up with Shaper in my pod on Tazri, which is like it's lost a bit of ground, but like it's still an immensely powerful deck, and it was in the hands of a very skilled player. So it was a bit.
I heard there was quite a bit of Tasigur running around. Did you guys face any of that?
Yeah, not my semifinal pod, but one of my Swiss pods was me, and then a Chainveil Teferi player, and then actually 2 Tasigur players. I believe there were 3 or 4 out of the 30 odd players in the tournament.
That sounds quite. Is that where you want to be with Muldrow, or is that a challenging pod?
It was definitely where I wanted to be. Although I tried to be aggressive and use Lion's Eye Diamond to get Muldrow out early, and then Muldrow died, and then I used Lion's Eye Diamond. But I was able to pull it back because the Teferi player had like 8 islands, and I managed to land a Carpet of Flowers.
Nice.
And then going from there, I just had so much mana to work with that I was able to sort of regain the lost ground that way.
Were these primarily like seasons past control decks, or were these more flavor?
I believe they were the seasons past control. I think I only saw one seasons past, and it didn't seem like there was a lot of reanimation going on. I know that I believe they were both on Isochron Scepter into the Beast Within Reality Shift as their win condition.
And noobs, that season past Tasigur style deck that's pretty popular in play EDH, right?
There's the guy who's doing, I think he's second on Play EDH. He's been kicking teeth in with his Tasigur deck, which is it's built in the seasons past style, although he's diverged away from. So this is, I think, Labmania Cameron's build that he's popularized. Now, personally, I have my qualms with that build specifically. I think that
I think we all do.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But it's certainly one of the most popular Tasigur builds. But yeah, he's been doing quite well with that, and I think that's just due to what the meta looks like. That is I wouldn't necessarily call it parasitic, but that kind of control deck does quite well. And what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so I know in the last tournament, one of the newer decks was making at the time was making quite the splash in that tournament with I think 3 pilots, and that was Godo. Did we see? I don't think there was any Godo in this most recent tournament. If I'm
I think Godo sort of dropped off the face of the earth a bit. He was like one of those flavor of the month commanders. I think that like you just see like rocket onto the scene because it's something new. There's something unique about them. In his case, like the fact that he's a mono red fast combo deck, I think really drew a lot of people in.
And also, there's a certain appeal to your commander being a 1-card combo.
Yeah. And I think he's just one of those decks, and there are so many like him that have sort of gone through the phase of being hyper popular and then just broke
Selvala,
away completely.
Sidisi, yeah.
Yeah, just so many of them where it's like it's unique and everything, but uniqueness does not equate to strength.
Yeah. So
unfortunately enough,
I feel like I might be a bit biased because Godo has been my baby for a long time, but and I was definitely involved a lot with brewing the initial competitive version with the few other members from the Godo community, the mono red server. But I think a lot of the people who play Godo have either competitively have either lost flavor or lost interest, or they're just not as active online anymore. Because I know one of the primary pilots was, I think his name is Insert Clever Phrase Here. And he was rocking the he was rocking the Trice metagame for a bit, but then I think he hasn't been on in like a long time. So could also be that just the pilots aren't as active anymore. That contributes to it as well. But again, also flavor of the month.
So yeah, pretty much. So yeah, I think it's a good wrap up of sort of our experiences in the tourney for the most part. Oh well, I guess
the finals pod. The finals pod is
that dreaded finals pod.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I can give the wrap up of it quickly.
Okay. Yeah.
Want to go through it? So there's a really strong combo in a deck called Razakats, which is a 4-color Razakath list with Thrasios the Timid at the helm. And it's called Entomb plus Reanimate. And sometimes when you entomb a Jin Cataxius and reanimate it on turn 2 into a pod of 3 other decks that all run Gilded Drake, there are some silly things that can happen, which include a Jin Cataxius changing control 5 times in a single game.
So if I recall correctly, I think there was 5 or 6 players who ended up drawing 7 cards off the Jin Cataxius, but only like 1 or 2 players who actually ended up discarding 7 cards.
Yeah.
So I drew 7 cards twice and never had to discard. I believe that Astral Codex, who went on to win, drew 7 cards twice and discarded once.
Yeah.
I got my single draw 7, then I had to discard it the next turn.
And then the 4th player, whose name I will butcher.
That is we'll just call him Sug.
Sug. Unfortunately, never got to play with Jin Cataxius.
Yeah.
He tried. He cast a Praetor's Grasp and targeted me, attempting to find my phantasmal image to copy a Gilded Drake, but I'd actually drawn the phantasmal image and he wasn't able to find it.
Wow. Yeah, so I think as a spectator, that was a really fun game to watch. So I think the VOD of that is up somewhere.
It is. It was posted on the
We'll link in the description, I think.
Yeah.
That game if people want to watch it. But yeah, I think that's about the best you could have asked for a finals.
Yeah, it was really interesting to watch. Okay, yeah.
I'm a fan of Jin Pong.
Moving on from the CDH tourney, onto quite the interesting Reddit post. And I'm gonna pass this off to Sick Robot because this is his area of expertise. So I'll just give a brief summary. There was a Reddit post on the CDH subreddit about someone asking for a particular Hulk pile that they called a 4 Horsemen Hulk pile because they believed it would be similar to the 4 Horsemen of Legacy fame, I believe.
Yes.
Where it was non-deterministic, so you can't like shortcut it, and then you get pinged for slow play. But this inspired quite the discussion and quite the new very, very interesting brew for kind of a mixture between the Breakfast Hulk and the definitely not Viral's deck, or 4-color Flash Hulk, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, take it away, Sick. Give us the juicy deets. Yeah, so
the Flash Hulk line that sort of shook up the entire community actually only really happened a week ago. I'm gonna credit Sleepy Jackdaw just off the bat here for coming up with the line. Sleepy Jack on the subreddit and on the Discord, just like insane out of nowhere, posted this line, which pretty much was one of the holy grails that we've been looking for a while. Basically, the reason why this is so good, and I'll go over this right now, is that it is a Flash Hulk pile that wins at instant speed, and you do not need a second Hulk trigger. So you don't need to use like Karmic Guide or Body Double or Body Snatcher or any of these things to reanimate the Hulk and get like a 2 CMC creature. You can just win the game off of a single Hulk trigger. Which is pretty much what we've been looking for a long time now, and it just makes it super, super efficient to win with. But yeah, I think we can go over this later, and I'll go over the pros and cons of it, but it was just like huge development, and I definitely think that we're going to be seeing a lot more of the same Flash Hulk deck in the next little while, I think.
Yeah, so now that we've given you the teaser, in the next topic, we're going to go into more detail. But just to wrap up this new developments section, does anyone want to talk about what they've been working on or how their decks have been performing in the various metas that everyone's playing in?
Sure, I can start things off. These days in paper, I've been working on the Thrasios Val Smasher Divergent Control deck. This is a brew that Siggy has been working on as well, and I'd like to showcase it here. So it's a combo deck primarily based around the card Divergent Transformations. The whole point of the deck is to assemble Notion Thief and Whirlpool Warrior as a disruption package, and that leads into your combo package, which is an Isochron Scepter reversal deck. The deck works because you have your 2 partner commanders, and in your main deck you only have the 2 combo commanders. There are multiple versions of this combo package, so I'm running the Notion Thief Whirlpool Warrior version, but there's also like a Razaketh version. There's also like a Labman version. So this deck, I've been having a bit of trouble with my local metagame as a mostly stacks-based, disruption-based metagame, which also includes Spleen's Muldrow deck. But I hope to keep kind of refining it. It has a lot of potential as a control combo shell.
Okay, yeah. So I've been playing Gitrog on the cEDH server. There was a bit of a hiatus there for a bit, but back, played some games, lost to Una twice, got screwed a bit by turn order, but also just, you win some, you lose some. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll make a comment on Arixmathes, the jankiest blue-green deck of all time. Arixmathes is the sea serpent that is a land when he has counters on him and turns into a 12/12. Really, the only reason that I've been bringing him is because he can tap for a blue and a green, and when he's a creature, you can suit him up with a Pemon's Aura or Freed from the Real, and make infinite green mana with him, and then just use an outlet for it. So I've been playing him sort of like a hybrid between Solvala and Rashmi, instead of going like control with a combo finish. I don't think it's a great deck in any measure, but it's sort of fun to play. So I've just been playing that on practice pods recently on the CDH server.
Nice. Also, I want to mention that I've been kind of toying around with Shimmers a bit, with including more stacks pieces. So typically Shimmers is kind of mostly all in combo, no real stacks besides like just the basic interaction. That's all you're about to defend yourself or protect against other combo players. But I've been toying around with the idea of Graph Cage, Rest in Peace, Aven Mind Sensor, Curse Totem, Containment Priest, just because of the prevalence of Hulk, Razaketh, and I think their consistent ability to beat us in speed. So I've been toying around with that, but still don't have a finished build yet. Need to kind of go back to the drawing board on that one, but I look forward to seeing where that ends up. Spleen, anything from you?
Yeah, so I've been working on Estrid Chainveil stacks. So Estrid is one of the new cards from Commander 2018, and the key piece is that her plus ability untaps all your enchanted permanents, which means that she's possibly the most effective stasis commander that there is, because it's just so easy to throw a couple enchantments on a land or two, or maybe a creature, and then play things that stop everyone else from untapping, and then continue to untap. And then with a bit of setup, she can also go infinite with the Chain Veil and mill your deck and put all your enchantments onto the field, which is not too hard to turn into a win.
Nice. Anyone see any decks that they think has promise, from either brew discussions or just in games or anything?
I know that Frozen in Fate on the Discord has been playing around with Nagila Hulk recently, which is sort of a novel idea. I think that the general concept is being that Nagila already has some pretty powerful one-card win conditions, and she's pretty stacks resilient as is. So just by adding in Flash Hulk, you get access to wins without having to set her up, without having to like cast her or keep her on the void. So it makes you less vulnerable to cards like Fire Covenant or like Toxic Deluge. We'll see how it develops. I think he's still playing around with some different Hulk piles. He's testing with where he wants to be on that. I think it has promise though, so we'll see how it develops in the next few months.
With Nagila, isn't one of the advantages that your win con is immune to most of the stacks pieces, and then you get to run stuff like Rest in Peace or Graph Cage. So wouldn't Hulk kind of negate that, or is that just not relevant at all?
Sometimes yes, it's for the Staxer builds, but what you can also do is, because you're still not really utilizing artifacts, you still get to run stuff like Null Rod.
Stony
you still get to run stuff
yeah.
like Stony Silence. You can still run asymmetrical stacks effects like even Mind Sensor. So you still get to do a lot of the stacksing with normal, but you're sort of getting also like the added kick of the potential like turn 2 win, or like you get to win off of, like an empty board, which Nagila doesn't really get to do otherwise.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, we'll see how that turns out. But I think this is a good point to move on from the new development section and move on to topic number 1. And we're going to do a bit of a deep dive on the new Flash Hulk pile. So I think we'll just pass this off to Sick. Why don't you give us a bit of a background on how the Flash Hulk, maybe since it's how Hulk has since its unbanning has kind of evolved as an archetype, and then where we are now.
Sure. So yeah, once Hulk got unbanned, the whole format got thrown into disarray. I mean, like Hulk paired with partners that it just like makes for a really obvious, very powerful deck that you can do a lot with. You can sort of slot in a lot of different engines and stuff. There were a couple of decks that really started at like the unbanning and have continued up to now, being at like the top of the pile, which would probably be like Hulk Weaver and Breakfast Hulk. Hulk Weaver being the build that uses Karmic Guide, Sack Outlet, and some combination of another Reanimator and a Blood Artist to win. Breakfast Hulk being the good old Legacy Breakfast combo, where you get a Cephalid Illusionist and a Nomad's Encore, mill your entire library, mill an Archimeeba, Flashback Dread Return, do all that fun stuff. And they both had their benefits. Both had some downsides too.
Notably,
historically, Breakfast Hulk,
you get to run stuff like Hermit Druid and Breakfast Hulk, right? That's one of the main advantages.
Yeah, you get to race people real hard when you just have a 1-card win condition that is a 2-mana creature. That's pretty good. It is probably, if you include the Hermit Druid wins, it's probably the fastest deck in the format because of that. But it also has the problem where it takes up a bunch of slots, a bunch of dead cards to actually be able to do that. Whereas when you move over to the Hulk Weaver side of things, it's more, you have to run less slots, there are fewer dead cards, but it doesn't exactly have the same raw power and speed that Breakfast Hulk has. So that's sort of been the trade-off up until now. But now we have this insanely good Hulk pile that is pretty much replacing every Breakfast, or rather, well, it sort of is replacing Breakfast Hulk, but it's mostly replacing the Hulk Weaver style decks by pretty much just sheer slot efficiency and power.
So
So
what's that combo exactly? I think you touched on it briefly earlier, but let's go. Yeah.
The combo is that you're gonna get a sack outlet such as a Viscera Seer or Carrion Feeder. You're gonna get a Blood Artist, and then you're gonna get the Cephalid Breakfast combo, which is the Cephalid Illusionist and Nomads on Core, which can mill your deck on their own. So that's your 6 mana of creatures that you're getting. And then what you also want to have is you want to have in your library a card like Guy's Blessing or one of the Eldrazi Titans that basically you need a card that when it hits the graveyard for your deck, it'll shuffle your graveyard back in. So you need one of those in your deck, and then you need a Narcomoeba in your deck. And basically what you do is you mill cards with the Cephalid Illusionist and Nomads Encore until you hit your Narcomoeba. You bring back your Narcomoeba. You sacrifice it to your sacrifice outlet, which gives you a Blood Artist ping. You ping someone, and then you shuffle your graveyard back into your library with your shuffler, and then you keep doing that until somebody dies. So the big reason why this is really good is because you can do all of this in instant speed. So you can do this in somebody's end step. You can do this in your end step. You can do it on somebody's upkeep. You can do all sorts of crazy things at instant speed. But it also fits within a single Hulk trigger.
So that's one of the main advantages over something like your definitely not Viral's deck.
Yeah, or a Hulk Weaver style variants that we could already win at instant speed with Protean Hulk. We just couldn't do it in a single Hulk trigger from 0 board position.
And if I'm not mistaken, this version seems to be a bit more resilient to Grave Hate. Is that correct?
It is. There is a card called Memory's Journey. And what Memory's Journey reads is it's a blue instant. The mana cost doesn't really matter because I'll get to it later, but it reads shuffle up to 3 target cards from any player's graveyard into the library. But it has a flashback cost of a single green mana. So typically how you'd hate out like a breakfast combo deck or something like that is like, say they try to mill their entire library and go to flashback Dread Return. Well, in response, you could do something like discard a Fairy Macabre, or, activate a Tormod's Crypt, do some Deathrite Shaman stuff, anything like that, and you can disrupt them by just exiling something out of the graveyard. And that's historically something that all the Hulk variants have been at least a bit weak to, just because you just sort of by virtue of playing Protean Hulk, you need to get stuff into your graveyard to kill people. But now, because of the Memory's Journey and the fact that you're milling your library, if somebody tries to use a single shot Grave Hate, like Tormod's Crypt or Fairy Macabre, to hit key pieces out of your graveyard, if you have a single green mana up, you can, in response to them doing that, flashback the Memory's Journey and shuffle in your key pieces to your library, and then keep going on top of their Grave Hate card on the stack and kill them through that. So that's just super powerful, right?
Yeah, certainly. Now I've got a few points that I want to bring up and get some clarification on. So I've been following this brew like sort of from the periphery, so I'm not super up to date on, because this has been evolving pretty quickly and lots of pivots and changes, or not necessarily huge massive ones, but definitely details that matter. So one is, I know there was talk of Cabal therapy to get combo pieces out of your hand, but that's something that you can only do at sorcery speed. So I think there was something you guys were discussing about maybe Body Snatcher as an alternative, or that is a specific build. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. So me and Siggy, Lobster, Siggy from the Labmaniacs, whatever you want to call him, have been sort of the main people brewing on this currently, and we have a couple of different builds set up. One of the builds used Cabal therapy to get like dead combo pieces out of our hand so that we could put them into the graveyard and shuffle them back in and combo anyway. But we found it was a bit clunky because you can only flashback Cabal therapy at sorcery speed, and it requires you to already get your combo out and all of this stuff. It's a bit messy. So I sort of pulled a bit from my Definitely Not Virals, 4-color Virals, whatever, my 4-color flash deck. And we're currently trying out Body Snatcher, which is a 4-mana creature that reanimates Hulk with a sack outlet. But it also has this incidental trigger that when it enters the battlefield, you get to discard a creature card. which means that if you have something like your Eldrazi Titan stuck in your hand, you can actually discard it at the same time that you're doing your Hulk pile, shuffle it back in, and then combo through that anyway. And you can do this all at instant speed. So it makes it super, super convenient because it lets you combo at instant speed with no additional mana, and you get to do it with a combo piece in hand.
And this is only for certain combo pieces, right? Because if let's say you get a Cephalid Illusionist stuck in your hand, it's not gonna.
Yeah, but okay. This is for Narcomoeba and the Eldrazi Titan specifically. But it still gives you a lot more flexibility as to when you can go for the combo and for when you can go for the combo with cards in your hand still.
Okay. And another thing, so did your I can't quite remember for sure, but did your Definitely Not Viral's deck run Grand Abolisher, and did it have Grand Abolisher lines? Because I know that was something that was great with Breakfast. It struggled to win at instant speed, but at sorcery speed, it was able to find protected piles through Grand Abolisher, meaning that your graveyard hate was very limited to things like Fairy Macabre or a Scavenger Grounds or like land-based interaction.
Yeah, so my old deck, my old Flash Hulk deck, did not have access to Grand Abolisher. It's just really hard to fit it in, and it's a bit difficult to get it inside of a trigger because there are only so many creatures that you can get. But in this new build, we have a couple of builds floating around, but a couple of them are able to fit the Grand Abolisher piles in using Spellseeker, because Spellseeker can go and get Reanimate and basically be a 3 CMC Hulk Reanimate inside of the pile. So it's definitely, it has the option to be able to run that package now and just pretty much lock out interaction completely once you get a single Hulk trigger.
Yeah, this combo seems to be able to take the best of both builds and just unify it into one slim package, which is amazing.
That's pretty much the appeal here, is that it's a really nice hybrid of sort of the instant speed and the flexibility of the piles that come from Hulk Weaver and DNV, with the basically the speed and resiliency of the Breakfast Hulk piles, while also being very, very slot efficient and only having minimal dead cards.
Yeah, and I guess also with Breakfast, it's just a combo that's easier to manually assemble. No, right? So if you get pieces stuck in hand, it's easier to cast like a Nomad's Encore or a Sack Outlet.
It's definitely easier than it used to be in old like Hulk Weaver decks, where you'd have to like cast like a 5 mana card out of your hand. Now all of our combo pieces that we would need to cast are all 1 or 2 mana, which is significantly easier.
Wow. So have you done any playtesting with this new version?
Yeah, I've gotten a few games in so far, and it's just felt super good. Just having the option now to just pretty much combo through any single piece of interaction is just so powerful. And maintaining the ability to combo at instant speed just means that you pretty much are always a threat once you have 2 mana up. You just get to pretty much bully the entire table into holding up interaction for you, because at some point you can just win at any point in time at the drop of a dime.
One thing I didn't touch on is stacks. So Breakfast Hulk suffered from some stacks-based interaction. I know they have. I think they were on Proctor, or were they on Relic Border as their removal?
I believe they were on Proctor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they had piles through Rule of Law, I believe, right?
Yeah, because the whole thing with the Breakfast combo is you have to cast Dread Return as part of the combo. So that means that unless you are getting removal inside of your pile, you can't actually combo through a Rule of Law effect.
So this version seems to suffer less from these kinds of stacks effects, like Rule of Law. I know DNV doesn't matter. Rule of Law doesn't matter at all because you're not casting anything. And this is the case as well in this new version. So you don't even have to worry about getting removal and pivoting your Hulk pile in that sense, correct?
Yeah, you can pretty much just be safe completely by comboing through stuff like Trinosphere or Rule of Law. You don't really have to be concerned about those much at all. anymore.
What stacks effects you have to worry about? So they're the obvious ones being Rest in Peace, Graph Cage, Containment Priest, and those are all just going to shut you out immediately.
Yeah,
Anything else?
pretty much at this point, all of the sort of like incidental weaknesses have been optimized out of the piles. Really, your best bet to stop Hulk at this point, and really the only things that you should be running as specific hate for us is like, yeah, Grafdigger's Cage. You're looking at Rest in Peace, Cursed Totem, Containment Priest. You really just want those hate pieces that stick to the board.
Do you
And
guys
that
not? I
just
thought. Don't you guys have a? Can't you find a Relic Warder or Proctor to get out of Curse Totem?
Yeah, so that's actually a good point, is that in some of the builds, we can still win through Curse Totem on board without any additional setups. So even Curse Totem is losing its value against Hulk right now.
And then obviously Macabre and all these Grave Hate effects that we're seeing.
In my opinion, and I think a
Yeah.
lot of people share this in the Hulk community, it's just not worth it anymore to try to get the Hulk player with, Tormod's Crypt or Fury Macabre. It's just it doesn't do enough of the time anymore. You just sort of have to dedicate those slots to the permanent based Grave Hate.
So this is we've mainly been focusing on dedicated Hulk decks, but I know Razakats. There's a Raza Hulk variant, and you're talking about Nagila Hulk. So are those decks? Do you think looking to adopt this new pile, or are they on their own piles still?
I think they might. The one thing is it might be too many slots for them to want it. But then again, I mean, if you're on Razahulk, you're probably on Spellseeker anyway, and Spellseeker meshes really nicely with this pile. So I think it's going to require some more testing, but it definitely has the potential. I mean, the pile is just so efficient; you can pretty much put it into anything.
And is this deck
we'll
running
see.
ad nauseum?
You can. It can actually definitely run ad nauseum if you swap the Eldrazi Titan to a Guy's Blessing. The average converted mana cost of the deck is actually like below 1.6.
As
which is
a
just
Gitrog
insane.
player, don't fear the Titan, my friend. we've got
Yeah, man. It's just gonna. Sometimes you just take 13 off the top of your library. It's just something that happens,
Are the Gitrog's average CMC right now? I think for a lot of the newer lists, so not Leptus's list, because I think he's still his list is still up there a bit. But I know my list, I think Kibitson's list are they're below 1.6, like 1.58 with the Titan still. And
Yeah.
ad nauseum is still one hell of a card. So
Yeah, it's pretty good. But yeah, I mean, I think there are some versions of the deck floating around right now that are more akin to breakfast and deck building philosophies, like adding stuff like Lion's Eye Diamond and Aurochs Salvagers combo, and adding in ad nauseum and rituals for that. And I think their average CMC is at like 1.48, which is just like insanely low. So yeah, so we'll see. I mean, it's still in testing, but it has a ton of promise.
okay. Does this deck have any kind of like layered combos, or is it? I know some decks are on like the Tainted Pact and Demonic Consultation with Labman have been very popular as a additional layered combo, but this deck doesn't seem like it'd want to be on that. Is there any layering going on here?
There's not a ton in that sense. It's historically been pretty hard, and I don't think it's ever going to get better to layer things like Icecrown Receptor, Dramatic Reversal, or Tainted Pact and Labman into Hulk piles, just because you really, really don't want to be exiling any of your combo pieces, even for stuff like this. I mean, I can maybe see some Breakfast
Bomberman?
Hulk style variant being like one of the versions where you play Labmaniac and then maybe you just put in a consultation as a backup win condition, but
Yeah.
it's hard to make it fit, and I don't think it's going to be worth it a vast majority of the time.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for our resident Hulk expert?
I guess so. You mentioned putting in the Titan versus the Gaia's Blessing. If you do go with Gaia's Blessing, I guess as a concession to ad nauseum, have people come up with a way? It seems like if you draw Gaia's Blessing, you're in trouble. So have people come up with any way of mitigating that if they do want to run Gaia's Blessing?
So there are ways to combo with a guy's blessing hand, but a lot of the time they end up being discarding it and then shuffling it back into your library with the Memories Journey. So you're sort of conceding a bit to the Sickle Shot Grey Fate on that front. Um, but I mean, it's it's probably going to be more than worth it if you're on the Adnos plan, just because you no longer have to worry about hitting that 11 or 12 off the top of your library.
Is there any consensus in the community about which direction, or not necessarily consensus, but is there a preferred direction you guys are leaning right now between Gaia's Blessing and the Eldrazi Titan?
So I think for the most part, we're looking more at the Eldrazi versions, just because the combo density is way higher, just because you get to play cards like Natural Order, Pattern of Rebirth, and then you get to use those to turn your sacrifice outlets into live cards as well. I could definitely see a world where the Adnaz version ends up being better. Definitely, there are probably metas out there where it is, but I think overall the sack outlet based Eldrazi Titan version is shaping up to be a pretty dominant force.
Nice. Okay. Null, do you have anything? Any questions?
Yeah, I've got a question. I'm curious to know, as you said, like the deck is weak to permanent based interaction like Rest in Peace. Are there any decks kind of established already that run the majority of what really hates out the current Hulk deck? I guess by extension, I'm kind of asking like, what are you worried about?
Good question. There are a few decks running around right now that can give Hulk decks real problems. Specifically, consultation decks. Kess is a big one. Kess sort of just gets to run all of the hate that she wants, and she runs like little pyroclasms to get rid of your dorks to slow you down. She has a bunch of counter magic. There's also stuff like Brea Consultation, who gets to run Grafdigger's Cage and just hate you out. Also, decks like Tazri, although you don't really want to dilute your combo too much, it definitely has the slots to play something like Containment Priest, maybe a Grafdigger's Cage. It has no problem having those in the deck as extra hate against you. I know I've seen some tech on the cEDH server of people playing NFNs of the Foremost as a commander, as a sort of anti-Hulk Hulk or anti-Hulk Razaketh deck.
Also
just to
anti
have a
Gitrog. Also
hate piece.
anti Gitrog.
That too. Just to have a hate piece in the command zone that you can drop whatever time. I've seen some people recommending Bloodpod as a counter. I haven't played against it a bunch, but the ones that I have, it just seems like it's a bit too slow. You're sort of reliant on getting your hate pieces in your opening hand to slow down the Hulk player. I think it's a lot more important to have the permanent-based Hulk mixed with permission. Just having the counter magic is so important in the matchup.
That makes a lot of sense.
So to that end, would a deck like the more stacksy mid-rangey Nagila decks, could they also work against this new?
Yeah, Nagila can also be a huge problem. Nagila with a good counter magic suite and then just all of the hate that she can fit can be a huge deal, because she's super good at getting through stalled board states. She just amasses an army on her own and sometimes doesn't even need a win condition card, which can be really powerful in metas where games just grind to a stop.
So do you think decks that traditionally haven't been running these pieces perhaps do a bit to greed, and maybe that that these Hulk decks or these more graveyard based decks haven't been as prevalent or as scary, should now be considering running more hate? So I know that's, like I was saying earlier in the episode, I've been looking at more hate for my Zer deck, like Rest in Peace. I know that shuts off Yogg Will, but frankly, I'm terrified of Hulk and Razaketh as it stands. So I've been looking at that. Do you think other decks should be looking at that as well?
I mean, yes, but it's like super meta dependent, right? You're only going to be, the hate is only going to be as strong as the Hulk presence in your group is. If nobody's playing Party Hulk in your group, there's no reason to, right? But I think that you do have to make concessions once there's a Flash Hulk player in the pod, because just the pure power of a 2-mana instant speed combo is enough to force hate sometimes, I think. Or even just maybe not even putting in extra hate pieces, but just changing your play patterns around potential turn 2 wins or just super mana efficient wins. You just have to be aware of it and make sure that you know what you're getting into when you're tapping it on turn 3 to play a value engine.
Okay.
Spell Slinger's going in all my decks.
Okay, so with that, I think we can wrap up this topic and move on to topic number 2, which is cards from Guilds of Ravnica that we think are worth talking about for CDH. Maybe not necessarily ones that are just even going to make it into CDH decks, but ones that have been having some buzz in the community and that we wanted to just weigh in on. Okay, so card number 1. This one that's everyone's been buzzing about. Certainly, I've been very excited about it to put into my Gitrog and Anafenza deck, and that is Assassin's Trophy. So, guys, what do you think? This card sucks, right?
Oh, it's absolutely terrible. Unplayable in CDH.
It's too restrictive, right? It doesn't kill indestructible things.
And,
so.
Oh my god, ramping an opponent? That's just so bad.
Path to Exile doesn't see play, so why would this see play, right? Okay, yeah.
What the heck?
All seriousness, this card is insane.
Oh, it's ridiculous. Obviously, it doesn't have the uncounterable clause that Abrupt Decay does, but I mean, just being able to hit anything is so flexible, right?
Yeah, I know Abrupt Decay, kind of staple in just about any deck that can run it. It's, uncounterable, hitting like almost any permanent. That kind of flexibility is unrivaled. But as a Gitrog player, sometimes people run Leyline of the Void, or sometimes there's a Chain Veil Teferi player, and you want to remove their Chain Veil, and then your Abrupt Decay or your natural state isn't looking so clever because it's 4 CMC. But, Assassin's Trophy doesn't have that restriction. It just hits everything.
And I think the ramping 1 land is more than enough. Like, that's fine. I'm okay with giving somebody a land if I'm getting, like, their Gaia's Cradle save, because it can hit lands, too. So say you have a Yisan player or, like, a Derevi or Hackball player at your table, and you just want to get rid of their Anasaurus real quick, just getting rid of a Gaia's Cradle is insane.
I know. I've recently cut Strip Mine from my Gitrog deck, and some people are a bit iffy about that, but some also agree. And I think Strip Mine, is its main utility now is just for removing Gaia's Cradles, and with this, it's just another way to remove Gaia's Cradle that you don't really need a Strip Mine for. You don't need to sacrifice your colored sources for kind of a mediocre land and removal source for Gaia's Cradle. I think just. And also as a creature removal, like I mentioned Leyline of the Void, Chain Veil, but removing 4 CMC plus commanders, removing a Sisse, removing Gitrog, removing Momir Vig. I know it depends on what meta you're seeing in. Removes Teferi, yeah.
That's not like you're
yeah.
Hitting
it's not like you were running
like,
Hero's Downfall, right?
Elishnorn as well, hitting like a Jin Cataxias. It's just it's just so flexible. The card is just going to get you out of whatever situation that you're stuck in, where you're locked under a single card, right?
And I know also you guys are all a bit spoiled because you play you're not stuck on just Golgari in with Gitrog, but our best removal option creature wise has been Dismember. That comes in and out of the deck depending on whether or not you need to remove stuff. But
yeah, I mean on Virals, I've been stuck on Vendetta for the longest time, and this is such a great upgrade because it costs 1 more mana, but it's an answer to everything that you could possibly ask for.
There's you had no way Dismembered can't hit other Gitrogs, so you run into quite the challenges. But yeah, this card is going to go in every deck I think that can run it. Or is there any reason you wouldn't run it in a deck that can?
I think maybe if you're just not in if you're in a meta that's not really stacks based, maybe if removal isn't actually that valuable to you, I think you're probably going to be on something like Swords to Plowshares or Abrupt Decay before this. But I mean, any slot after that,
I could see this over Abrupt Decay though, right? If you think about if you're in I guess it depends, right? So
if you're in like a Blood Pod and Yisan meta where the uncounterable clause doesn't really matter and you really need to be able to hit big stuff, I could definitely see this over Abrupt Decay.
Yeah,
it just gives you so many options.
Yeah. Okay. So let's I think Assassin Trophy is something that's clearly, everyone's kind of unified on their opinions. But let's move on to some other cards where there's been discussions in various deck servers about whether or not they want to include these stuff. So let's talk about Mausoleums is it Mausoleum Secrets or Mausoleum? Yeah, Mausoleum Secrets. Okay, so it's for 1 and a black. It has Undergrowth. Search your library for a black card with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So I know there was at instant speed. Correct?
At instant speed.
So I know there was talk about this on the Gitrog server. I think there was some chatter on the Razaketh server as well. What decks do you guys think that this fits into, if any at all?
Well, I think it's a bit of a trap. It looks better than it is. I think there are definitely places where it's going to see play, but it's a bit too restrictive, and sort of the black card clause there just sort of kills it for a lot of decks, I think. You just have so many better options in 4-color decks and 3-color decks that it's just never really gonna meet the standard that you need to include tutors, I don't think. And even in stuff like Gitrog, I think you already have such a density of threats that I don't think this is going to be needed.
I think as a pretty good, pretty long-time Gitrog player, I'll comment on this a bit. I think that the clause of having at least one creature in the graveyard defined, because all you need is one creature, then you're finding Dakmor or a discard outlet, essentially by finding Entomb for if you're trying to find Dakmor, or to find Putrid Imp if you're trying to find a discard outlet. So if this didn't have, let's say it was just +1, so at the very minimum, even if you had no creatures, you could find one CMC. I'd run this for sure, but it's just where it is right now. Having one creature in the graveyard is actually a pretty steep hump to get over. As well, people were talking about making Slaughter Pact more viable. A black card you can find with nothing in the graveyard, and Gitrog is currently running Slaughter Pact as something you can loop in your cleanup step kills. But even then, bad Doomblade does not make this enough to even just at the base level to make it worth looking at in Gitrog. I think in Razaketh, I think they're probably in the same boat. They don't want. They get to find their Entomb or their Reanimate, but they don't really want. They're not going to have. They're going to have issues trying to get that one creature in the graveyard.
Yeah, Spleen, have you considered it for Muldrow?
Not for very long. The honest truth is that there just aren't that many black cards that you really want to find. Obviously Entomb's good in the deck, but finding Entomb or Demonic or Vampiric Tutor doesn't feel awesome unless you're actually taking. I think what's different about Muldrow is that it's not better for these cards to be in the graveyard, right? You just have access to them. So Entomb is a good card, but not a fantastic one, because you're not cheating things out generally. So then the only really effective cards that you're finding are like Demonic Tutor or, I don't know, maybe Pernicious Deed, but 3 is certainly not something you can rely on, especially if you need Pernicious Deed and are on the back foot.
So the one deck I think we all agree that this finds a place for is in Virals. Is that right?
Yeah. That's just about the only place I can see this. Virals has a very easy time getting creatures in the graveyard. You can just cast your commander and sacrifice however many you need. And it's sort of just been hurting for more Entomb effects for a long time. It's pretty much one of the largest problems with the deck is you just don't have enough ways to have Entomb. If I could run 10 Entombs, I would. So yeah, just like having another effective copy of it in the deck just gives it another boost. Super nice to have it. On the off chance that you need something, like you can go get an abrupt decay if you need it, or you can get a Slaughter Pact. That's still totally viable. That's about the only place I can see it, though. Maybe we're looking at like Marin, but even then.
Well, I imagine it would be great in Divergent Transformations Control, right?
Oh yeah, obviously. You can go get all your 0 mana
Well,
black
of course,
cards.
yeah.
Yeah.
As long as both my commanders are in the graveyard, or one of my
Okay.
combo pieces, sure. I guess that's kind of a funny point, though, because if I do have a combo piece in the graveyard, I could just find reanimate.
I guess, yeah, but
Yeah. Yeah.
It's weak. It's weak.
Okay, so
but it's
moving
there.
on to the next card, let's look at okay, you know what? Mnemonic betrayal?
Mnemonic or
Mnemonic.
Mnemonic. If
Yeah.
Mnemonic.
Mnemonic
Mnemonic.
betrayal. Okay.
Numenok Betrayal. We'll call it that right now.
Okay. I definitely have some thoughts about
Yeah.
this card. As a longtime Kess player, I know the value of Yawgmoth's Will. So what this one says is exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards. You may cast those cards this turn, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those cards. At the beginning of the next end step, if any of those cards remain exiled, return them to their owners' graveyards, and then you exile Mnemonic Betrayal. So it's like Yawgmoth's Will, but you get to play your opponent's graveyard instead of yours, with the obvious, the one sort of difference also being you don't get to play lands, but that's not super relevant.
Did we also mention the casting cost? It's
Oh, sorry, yes. The casting cost is 1, a blue, and a black. So still 3 CMC, not that much harder to cast than Yawgmoth's Will in most situations, especially because a lot of these kinds of decks tend to be heavy on blue. I think that this card it's cute and it wouldn't be awful, but it's not great. The honest truth is that Yawgmoth's Will, sometimes you just sort of top deck it without planning around it, and it's great. But sometimes you're looking at a sort of setup turn where, you play a couple rituals and then a tutor, and then you play the Yawgmoth's Will, and then you get to replay the rituals and the tutor, or something like that. And so just kind of hoping that your opponents have relevant cards in the graveyard is not really where you want to be.
I guess like looking at the worst case scenario, if you're playing this just as a tutor, right? If someone's got a tutor in the bin, you're trying to find something. That's a 5 CMC tutor. Like that's just way too much. Yeah.
I do run a
want-
5 CMC tutor in my deck, but it's Dark Petition, so it has a Dark Ritual stapled to it.
Yeah, which is it's actually too. Yeah. I would like to make a comment about like a possible direction that you can take this card, and there's this archetype which is control combo, right? Where you're primarily playing control for the whole game, and you're trying to assemble a combo. With Mnemonic Betrayal, you kind of get two things. You kind of get two wins in a deck like that. One, you can play a storm-based control deck that can assemble a storm-based win late game, which storm-based combos are traditionally harder to disrupt than most other combos. And it also does. It also works great against opposing storm decks, in the sense that you can use their storm cards to win the game. Though storm decks traditionally aren't very weak to strategies like mill. So what this does is it lets you play a somewhat mill-like strategy, possibly play into their combos, disrupt them, and win using their cards. And it also, a mill-based strategy works great against decks like Yisan, where traditionally, Mnemonic Betrayal would be pretty hard to combo if you're just playing with Yisan cards. So I see there being this kind of control-based deck that can almost always win off a Mnemonic Betrayal. Yeah, I'm working on it.
So I think it's,
Yeah, it's an interesting.
it's like by mill you mean stuff like you'd be playing like Winds of Rebuke and like maybe like Thought Scours or something like that. Just like doing like incidental milling of people's stuff and then using it all later. Yeah, just like
even disruption, right? Like
just like anything that coincidentally puts things into the graveyard.
We're not playing Archive Trap here.
Yeah. I could see something like Meltdown being really powerful with this, right? Where like you melt down for 0, get a bunch of Moxes and Mana Crypts and whatever, and then you Mnemonic Betrayal and get them all back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if it's a Yisan deck, you just, if you board wipe, like they're just
hang on
dead
a
already,
second.
right?
No, the one thing that I think also makes this card a little bit worse is that they were very careful to make it not actually be grave hate.
Yes.
Like it's
definitely
so
not grave hate.
you know, if you're playing against a deck like Yisan is the example. Yes, you exile their cards. If you don't exile them, they are put back into the graveyard. If you do exile them, or sorry, if you don't cast them, they're put back into the graveyard. If you do cast them, I guess they're in play, which makes them harder to access. But there's almost no way to actually use this to exile your opponent's cards. So they were careful when printing that, and I think that hurts it a little bit because I could see, you know, running it, because sometimes it might make you win as, you know, the poor man's Yawgmoth's will. And then sometimes, you know, when you're really in a bind, it's grave hate. But since it's not, I think that also limits sort of fringe playability.
Well, imagine this kind of scenario. My opponent Razaketh deck attempts to reanimate a Razaketh. You know, my deck's primarily a control deck, so I'm just going to counter the reanimate. Now I have access to both their reanimate.
That is true.
And their Razaketh in their graveyard. And you can combo, you know, Razaketh.
It would exile.
Like, there's no deck you can't combo with Razaketh.
True.
Well.
It's just I think the where this card is going to end up seeing play is like probably as a meta call, right? Like if you're playing in a meta with like a bunch of Kess decks or like Storm decks and like that, it's just going to be amazing because
sit down at a table with 4 Yidris players and
oh yeah, you're just going to have all these people casting all of their rituals and tutors and trying to get to all their combos, and then you get to play a Yogg Will × 3, and that's just like the best case
this
scenario.
Sounds
right?
like I mean, sure, best case scenario, but also this sounds like a nightmare pod where everyone's got like you're worried about your own graveyard, you're trying to set up your own Yogg Wills, and then also trying to stop them from their own Yogg Will, their reverse Yogg Will.
If you're sitting down at like a stacks table or like even like a table of like Hulk decks or Razaketh decks, I just don't think it holds nearly enough value to be put into a deck, right?
Yeah. No, definitely. Even though you guys, I think it was Spleen, you mentioned that, like, you know, the land doesn't really matter. I don't know. I think that is a pretty notable downside, right? That's like, imagine everyone having a free Lotus Petal in their bin, right? If you're not missing your land play. So yeah, it's not Yogg Will, harder to set up, definitely very pod specific, but maybe if you've got the right meta that you can play this. Okay. Moving on, mission briefing. Who wants to read this one out?
Sure. So mission briefing costs blue. It's an instant. It says surveil 2, then choose an instant or sorcery card in your graveyard. You may cast that card this turn, and if it would be put into your graveyard this turn, then you exile it instead.
What does surveil do again? Let's just.
Surveil is it's scry, but instead of putting them on the body of your library, you can put them into your graveyard instead.
Okay, nice.
So yeah, it's sort of good. This is basically like Snapcaster without a body and with a couple of upsides.
An extra blue in the mana cost, that kind of sucks.
I think it's it's pretty easy to compare, right? You're just like looking at pretty much the same card.
Yeah.
It's basically you're looking at like the decks that already want to run Snapcaster, which are pretty few and far between, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at like probably your lower color control decks, maybe Rashmi, Baral, decks like that. Anything above there, you're probably looking at like playing like Noxious Revival or Regrowth effects over it.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a consideration in Kess, which doesn't get access to the green effects and can take advantage of the surveil maybe better than most decks.
That's also true. Just having the gray fueling power in Kess can be pretty nice.
There's also a consideration in divergent control.
That's also a good one.
That's true. Yeah. And I think I remember hearing on the Zer server about people talking about if you're trying to shimmer on the shimmer turns, how using your top deck tutor, if you don't have a draw card, mission briefing surveilling into something is, I guess that sort of counts as a draw. So, you know, if you were trying to assemble Adnaw's Angel's Grace in the end step, you get to save a mana if you mission briefing versus if you were trying to like draw it and then using like a another 2 CMC spell or something. Or I guess it's not really saving a mana in that case.
But
Yeah, there was some
redundant effects, right?
Yeah, it's. I don't think it's worth playing, but I just wanted to mention that there was some discussion there.
It's. I think it's a pretty marginal card. It may see play in some decks. I think you have to go through a few cards before you get to this one, though, right? Like I think
Agreed.
that's the general consensus.
Okay, so those are thoughts on that. Let's talk about Crawl Harpooner.
Yeah, sure. So 1 and a green for a creature insect warrior with reach, and it has undergrowth. When Crawl Harpooner enters the battlefield, choose up to 1 target creature with flying you don't control. Crawl Harpooner gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures cards in your graveyard. You may have it fight that creature, and it's a 3/2.
So a 3/2 fighter in green. So I know I played Yisan for a while. It seems like a pretty nice slot in there. Although there's already some fight creatures that we have, and there's if you're trying to find a creature removal in your early verses, because the standard ones are Somberwald Stag on 5 and Duplicant on 6. But then I know there's some lists that have toyed around with Treefolk Harbinger on 1 that finds Lignify to the top of the deck. But this is something that you can pretty much find with a creature tutor, or like let's say you've got a if you only need 1 creature in the bin, and then this fights a Linvala, which is what Yisan is most terrified of. Also, just straight off the bat, fights an Aven Mind Sensor. That's nice. On what else you got on flying? If you got a creature in the bin. Sorry, if you've got a creature in the bin, then it can fight and kill a Cass or a Zur. So there are targets, but it is definitely a bit niche in Yisan. So I'm not sure I'd put it in, but it's definitely something that's up there for consideration.
Yeah, I think the main application for this card, and there aren't a lot, but I think the main applications for this card are going to be in like very, very low color decks that are hurting for a way to get rid of Linvala.
Yeah.
Which are pretty much just going to be like Isan, and then this is another Viral's tech card. I think it's pretty much where we're at with it. Just having the option to get it, say, off of like a Hulk trigger. Say if you somehow got Hulk to die, you like necromancied a Hulk, got it to die. You already have Virals out. You can get a Crawl Harpooner and a Body Snatcher, kill the opponent's Linvala, and then combo anyway. Or like you can use your Whirly Tutors to go find it in response to an Even Mind Sensor or Linvala coming down.
Seeing that Viral's getting all the hot tech this
he's getting
set.
all the hot tech. Oh, he got 3 new cards this set. That's more than he's got like the past year.
Yeah, wow. Okay. Yeah. So I think that's all there's to be said about that one. Let's talk about Lizov the Malfurious. Multifarious. Sorry, I just messed up the...
So for blue and a black, legendary creature Shapeshifter. When Lizov enters the battlefield, survey 1. And he also has X. Lizov becomes a copy of target creature card in your graveyard with convert amount cost X, except its name is also Lizov. It's legendary in addition to its other types, and it has this ability, and it's a 1/3.
Okay, who wants to start us off with this one? Sick?
So I think I've seen a couple of people around looking at it as like a potential commander for blue black, and I think I've seen some people like working on doomsday piles for it. I don't remember what the actual doomsday piles are, but I'm assuming it's something like mill Labman into the graveyard, become a copy of it, do stuff like that. I think I saw some people like using them as like a pile cracker, where like you play them for 2, surveil 1, put the card into the grave, and then copy it.
Okay,
I'm not sure that's where its strength lies. I mean, it is a 1/3, and that's very relevant, right? In a Tymna meta, where you can just cast a 1/3 on 2 and then block Tymnas for days. That's definitely a relevant thing. But where I think this guy shines is maybe he's good in Hulk piles. Because
really? Okay,
what you can do in a Hulk piles is you can, say, copy a reanimate card, or maybe you have a Hulk piece in the graveyard. And what you can do is, instead of going through a bunch of hoops to shuffle it in, you just get Lizov as a 2 CMC card and then copy them with a bit of extra mana.
So you are dumping quite a bit of mana because most of those reanimate effects are pretty expensive.
I'm not saying he's good, but I think that might be his best shot at seeing play somewhere. I think other people can comment on this, but I think his combo potential is probably a bit too limited. I think it requires like too many pieces and a bit too much mana to make him worth it. But
okay.
I've seen Siggy doing some work on like making Lazav work in Hulk piles. So I mean, we'll see where he gets with it.
So I don't think this even comes close to being one of the top Dimir commanders that we would even consider if you're just going straight to Dimir. Where you got like Sirku, Una, Yuriko, like
yeah.
If you're below all of those. Probably
if you're
going
to be in blue-black and you're really like limiting yourself to just playing blue-black instead of like going into like Caster Jaleva, you really need a good reason, and generally that reason is because you have a Scepter outlet in the command zone, right? I think anything other than that is getting a bit iffy.
Okay. Do you think this will see any play? Besides, I mean, you guys are talking about it in Hulk, but I don't know. It doesn't seem super necessary, or it doesn't seem to provide too much. At least not yet. Nothing super obvious. But I don't know. I don't think it's going to see play anywhere else.
No, you seem to have an idea before we started. Was there...
Yeah, I think the one kind of nice interaction that you get is you kind of have a convenient way around some Grave Hate, right? Like you can effectively, it can become a lab maniac for you through a Grafdigger's Cage. I also like the idea that it can be this sack outlet as long as you have a creature in your graveyard that self-sacrifices, and with the survey you can dump your grave as well. So it's an interesting commander from that point of view, but I think its weaknesses are pretty clear, and it is definitely not best in your commander because you're really looking at infinite mana, which is just way better with Una.
Yeah, so I think we got a pretty good cover on
Lazav.
What it looks like on Lazav. I mean, maybe we'll see. Somebody will break it, new card will go printed, he'll just become the most insane thing ever. But I
took some random guys posting this new Hulk pile before all the dedicated Hulk players figured it out. Dude, someone's gonna crack Lazav wide open.
It's gonna get right broken. I mean, I'll reserve judgment until we see, but I don't have super high hopes for how he's looking right now.
Okay. Next one we've got Thief of Sanity. I can give this one a read. It's for 1, a blue and a black. Thief of Sanity is a creature specter with flying. He's a 2/2. Whenever Thief of Sanity deals combat damage to a player, look at the top 3 cards of that player's library. Exile one of them face down, then put the rest into their graveyard. For as long as that card remains exiled, you may look at it and cast it, and you may spend mana as though it was any type of mana to cast that spell. So, yeah, probably at 3 CMC, this kind of effect is too much. I mean, you've got... In similar cards would probably be Thada Adel, in the sense that it's an evasive card that kind of, does that exile effect, removes a card from their deck, and it's kind of like a pseudo draw. But then you also have Yuriko for just blue and a black as a creature that does something, draws you a card and also domes people if you're putting something like a Force of Will or Ad Nauseum, or even just putting like a 2 CMC spell. That incidental damage does add up, and it's Yuriko isn't nothing, and that's not really seen play in a lot of decks outside of the dedicated deck. So probably not going to see much play. Anyone else want to weigh in?
I think it, there's always the dream of, you hit them, and then it's, look, Chainmail's in the top 3 cards, and it's exiled face down, and then they lose. But I don't think that's a realistic dream, and I think that a 3-mana card that is blue and black, which means, it's not even easy to cast on 2 necessarily off like a dork, in a 4-color deck type idea, and then you have to attack with it, which means if somebody has a tutor, it's easy to play around. I think it's just a little bit too slow and takes too long to be relevant.
Yeah, I think this is sort of comes from a long line of bad Bobs, right? Like just trying to recapture the same power, but just not quite there. And like it's just the 3 mana sort of kills it. I like this would be really good if it was 2 mana. If you could slam it down in turn 2 when tapping out is still semi-safe. But when you're getting up to 3 mana, it just gets way too dangerous to tap out for a card that's not like giving you something immediately, right?
Yeah.
It is better than Night Veil Spectre, though.
I think if it were just black, yeah, it definitely is. If it were just black, it could fit into some like decent non-blue decks. It could
yeah, I mean, like pretty much every like non-blue deck is hurting for card advantage, right? Like I could see this.
Okay,
some of those decks.
That's all there is to be said about Thief of Sanity. Moving on to quite an effect that people might glance over if they're not CDH players. Torch Courier for a single red mana. He's a creature goblin with haste, and he has an ability: sacrifice Torch Courier. Another target creature gains haste until end of turn. So 1/1. So, where might this card have some application?
So this guy is what some Hulk piles have actually been looking for a long time. There are some Hulk decks running around that have been sort of floating around for a while now that haven't been the best, but they've been variations on sort of like the Lightning Druid shell, where like the whole point is they're playing like sort of this breakfast style deck, but you don't run any of the breakfast pieces, and instead you just run Hermit Druid, and then when you Hulk, you find Hermit Druid in some way to give it haste, and then you just activate it as your Hulk pile, so that you get to cut out all of like the dead breakfast stuff, and you don't have to play white. You can play red instead.
So what the current haste enablers have been in creatures for these Hulk piles have been there's Mogus's Marauder in black, and that's 3 CMC. And then there's for one in a red, I believe, with Soul Bond, right?
Yeah,
Lightning Mauler.
Yeah. So this is actually a strict upgrade on Lightning Mauler, where you can now give a creature haste for a single mana in your mana pool. So that leaves you 5 more mana worth of creatures to fit into a Hulk pile, which is actually pretty efficient. So this opens up doors, and like you can now do like a Druid combo, like Vizier Druid combo, to make infinite green mana, and that still leaves you a 1 CMC slot. You can give Hermit Druid haste, and you still have 3 mana worth of creatures that you can fit into that pile, which is pretty nice.
Yeah.
He just opens up a lot of like sort of deck specific Hulk piles where like maybe you want to minimize your dead cards and use stuff that you're already using as combo pieces, and you just need to give something haste to make a bunch of mana.
Okay, well, Hulk piles is a pretty good use, but outside of that, I can't see too many other uses. But dude, that's all you need.
Hey, man, staple in Pauper Goblins, calling it right now.
Oh yeah. Up next, we've got Doom Whisperer. Sick, you want to give someone a read?
Sure. Doom Whisperer, 3 black creature nightmare demon. It has flying, trample, and pay 2 life, surveil 2. It also happens to be a 6/6 for 5 with flying, which is pretty good.
not bad stats.
That's a big old beater boy if I've ever seen one.
Yeah. Flample too. Oof. No, there's no block in that one.
True combo. I'm just surprised it doesn't have Death Touch.
So this is basically Gristlebrand, right?
Oh yeah, effectively, right? You just pay a bunch of life, put a bunch of cards in your graveyard.
Yeah.
See, you don't have to go through all the steps of like drawing the cards and then casting them. You can just put them directly into your grave.
So yeah, I think one of the main problems with this one is it's 5 CMC for this effect. And also, you can't actually get too far down into your deck, right? If you've taken any amount of damage, you're surveilling, like you're not drawing cards, you're putting them in the bin. So you definitely need. It's not a 1 card combo on its own like Gristlebrand is essentially. It's not an ad nauseum, but it's you need something else. So people have talked about this maybe in Gitrog, where if you've got Gitrog in play and you're surveilling, you're drawing cards. So while it's true that if you've got Gitrog in play and Doom Whisperer, there's a pretty good chance you can dig to a tutor or actually Dackmore, and then you can stack your hand to go for like a cleanup kill. But what you're looking at Gitrog already being in play and then casting a 5 CMC creature card. and then to only sometimes get there because you'll need to have additional mana to cast your tutors. So I think you're looking at probably the best case scenario is in a Gitrog deck, and it's just not going to fit there. So I can't see this seeing any play. There's been talk, but I don't think so.
I mean, people have also talked a bit about it in Muldrow, the 5 odd players who actually play that or are working on that competitively. And again, the 5 mana slot is really awkward because if you're trying to do something like Entomb Reanimate, I don't think it's better than either of Nezahal or Jin-Gitaxias or Razaketh in most scenarios. And casting it is just a little bit too slow. In Muldrow, again, because it's not a deck that cheats things from the graveyard, it casts them. The amount of mana you need to make this useful sort of precludes it from seeing use. For reference, the only 5-drop creature that my list at least runs now is Sidisi. And if you have a Sidisi, if you cast a Sidisi from your hand, you can win for 1 additional mana. And this card, you can bin a bunch of cards and pray. So, no comparison there.
Yeah, I think the 5 CMC is really what kills this one, right? I mean, like I've also seen people like talking about it for like the mid-range slot in Bloodpod, the infamous mid-range slot. But it's just like, yeah, you're spending so much mana on an effect that's really not worth the time or effort. There's so many better cards than this.
Play this in Gitrog for probably 2 mana.
Oh yeah, man. 2 mana flample 6/6. Let's go.
I mean, even without the stats, just as a 1/1,
Yeah,
that effect is probably something I'd see play for lower CMC. But at 5, that's just such a high investment for something that has a medium impact. So next card we've got Bounty Agent. Spleen, give this one a read, please.
All right. So Bounty Agent is it's 1 and a white for a creature human soldier, and it is a 2/2. It has vigilance, and it has tap, sacrifice Bounty Agent, destroy target legendary permanent that's an artifact, creature, or enchantment.
I think this is pretty short description for this. Just like slow, bad Doomblade in white.
Yeah, it seems about right.
You're just sort of hoping that your 2/2 sticks around and hits a commander. I mean, I think the only place you're looking at this for is like in a meta where the only deck that exists is Sisay, and you need a card to kill Sisay.
I feel like I'd rather be on Fiend Hunter or that new one from Kaladesh, one of those.
You just like where you've already exhausted all of your options. You're playing Path to Exile, you're playing Swords to Plowshares, you're playing your 2 mana removal spells.
Not enough removal,
you just
man.
need another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like it only, like if you look at the cards it actually hits, the number of things where it's legendary, it stays in play, it's dangerous enough that you really feel you have to remove it, but not so dangerous that you lose when it lands, and it isn't a land or a planeswalker, is a pretty short list.
Yeah.
The Chain Veil. Also,
but you
it's
lose
kinda
when
tragic.
that one lands, right? Like almost every time.
No,
So.
well, you have an opportunity to respond.
But I mean, like, yeah, I guess if you have this out, then sure. But as a response to look for, like, if you think of it in like a green-white deck or something where you can tutor creatures easily, but maybe not instants and sorceries. But
that's like, and even then, like, you already have access to. You have like your Nature's Claim. You got like Path to Exile and Swords. You got Beast Within.
Well, even as it's just a creature package, I'd much rather just have a Caustic Caterpillar and like a Fiend Hunter, right? Like if I'm trying to remove creatures and enchantments and artifacts on a creature tutorable stick, like that, I think those 2 cards are just generically more useful than Bounty Agent because you don't need to wait a turn.
I mean, you could be vindictive, tutor it, cast it, and then next turn kill the Jin-Gitaxias after discarding your hand.
Yeah,
I think that's pretty much the extent
all that needs to be said about Bounty Agent. Up next, we've got Beast Whisperer. Null, how about you want to read this one?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go for this one. So Beast Whisperer, 2 green green for a creature, elf druid. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card, and it's a 2/3.
Okay, so sick. This seems like it'd be something that might fit into maybe like Momir. Is this something Momir wants? You've done a lot of work.
Yeah, so I
on
got
deck,
that. I've been getting that question a lot recently. And like I think it's the same thing for Yisan. I'm not going to speak for Yisan right now, but for Momir, it's the argument is that it can fill the same slot as Vizier of the Menagerie, where it's a hack on a stick. It's 4 mana. It's an elf, so you can tap it to Heritage Druid. So it's sort of better than Vizier in that one way. But honestly, we don't really want it, and it's because of pretty much one thing, and that one thing is that Beast Whisperer doesn't start the combo by itself. If you cast Beast Whisperer with a Momer on the board, you get to tutor the creature to the top of your library, but you don't actually get access to it. You have to cast another creature and then draw it. Where with Vizier starts its own chain, where you can just cast it, tutor something to the top, and immediately start casting off the top of your library.
So maybe if this also had Elvish Visionary stapled to it,
yeah,
it'd make the cut.
If it drew a card on ETB, or if it drew off of itself coming in, I think it's a pretty straightforward slot in over Vizier, just because it's an elf and it gets around Grafdigger's Cage. So great on that front, cool. But yeah, as is, I just don't think it's worth the slot in. People could say, I've heard people say like, oh, like what if you want 2 of the effect? But like honestly, it's the point of Vizier is that you just have access to it all the time anyway, because it's a creature and your commander tutors creatures. So like, there's no reason to have 2 of that effect, right? You just only need the 1.
I'll speak to this about ESN. I don't think this makes the cut. I know some lots of lists are on like a kind of looking for like a mid-rangey, grind kind of creature to get card advantage and whatnot. You've seen Oracle of Moldiah, Runic Armasaur more recently, Tireless Tracker, and frankly, I don't think this beats any of those. Maybe Oracle of Moldiah, but Tireless Tracker I've actually seen do a lot of work. That the fact that it grows and becomes such a big beater is quite relevant. Also, if you're just find jamming a fetch or something, getting those two clues, it's a lot. It's going to be a lot clean, because sometimes you just want to sandbag your creatures in hand if you've got if you're worried about a board wipe, trying to play around that. And then also Runic Armasaur is just, I think it's just much better than Beast Whisperer, in that people are going to be instantly getting these effects going. You're going to be drawing cards. It's also a 2/5 and for 3 CMC. So I don't think Beast Whisperer makes the cut, but there was some discussion of that going on the Ascent server.
Yeah, I think there's no other real spot for this unless y'all can think of something. That's pretty much it.
Okay.
I think it came up with some of the Animar decks that kind of also run Glimpse of Nature, but I believe like the better Animar decks are moving away from Glimpse anyways. It is,
okay.
But it did come up. As a tutorable
okay.
feature.
So the next one we've got Knight of Autumn for one a green and a white. Creature Dryad Knight, it's a 2/1 body, and when Knight of Autumn enters the battlefield, choose one. You've got 3 effects. First one being put 2 +1/+1 counters on Knight of Autumn. Second being destroy target artifact or enchantment, and the third being you gain 4 life. So pretty much the most relevant effect here is destroy target artifact or enchantment, meaning it's kind of like a Rec Sage with additional abilities. Do you guys have any comments on this one? Does this really replace Rec Sage?
I think it's like so. First of all, you're looking at the list of decks that run Rec Sage, which is already pretty small. You're looking at like just like low color decks. So you're looking at like Yisan, maybe Rashmi, like not even like maybe Momi or Vig, right? And none of those can run it because of the white cost. And then you're looking at, so probably past that, like Muldrow runs Rec Sage. It's white, can't run it there. So like you're looking at like the list of white-green decks that run Rec Sage, which is super short. Mm-hmm. And then even then, so we have to weigh the vulnerability to Blood Moon of this card versus the upsides that it brings, right?
It's also not an elf, so
yeah,
you're not.
that's
There's also non-elf, which is huge. And
Yeah,
then
that's
if
a
you
big deal.
weigh the upsides, so if we compare it base rate, it's the same as Rex Age for most intents and purposes. But you're trading off increased vulnerability to Blood Moon for either having the option to make it a 4/3 or gain 4 life, and those are both pretty inconsequential things in CDH. Like, the life isn't going to matter, and having a big beater is only really relevant when you want to be blocking Tymna, and it's already a 2/1, so it trades with Tymna. So it's
Yeah.
just, a lot of the time, it's just not going to end up being worth it. The extra mana cost really sort of kills it.
Also, I think, if you think about it like blocking a Tymna, I don't know if I had a Reclamation Sage in my hand, playing it, like, I feel like playing it without a clear target in mind is almost always wrong. Like, you'd rather just have it in your hand, and I don't think making it a 4/3 changes that calculus. I think if this is in my hand, it's going to stay in my hand until I'm destroying an artifact or enchantment, in which case, why isn't it Rex Age?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and our final card we're going to cover is Underrealm Lich, which is 3, a black, and a green. It's a creature, zombie, elf, shaman. And if you would draw a card, instead look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put 1 into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. It also has pay 4 life. Underrealm Lich gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it, and it's a 4/3. Now, I think I'm pretty confident that the only place this was discussed was for Gitrog, because it is alone a kind of like Dakmor stapled to a discard outlet if you get it out with Gitrog and you get a draw trigger on the stack, because then you're looking at the top 3, you're going to put a land into the bin, hopefully, and then generate another draw trigger to keep this chain going until eventually you hit Dakmor and a discard outlet, because you're getting to put cards into your hand. And I think I kind of talked about this with Doom Whisper, in that 5 CMC is just too much for something that really only has good utility with Gitrog in play. This would be an effect I would love to see at lower CMC, but even though it's this, pseudo Dakmor staple to a pseudo discard outlet, at 5 CMC, that's not really where you want to be, right? You can look at something comparable, whereas like Gerard's Orders. So that's 2, a green, and a black. Search your library for 2 creature cards, put 1 into the bin, 1 into your hand. That lets you tutor Dakmor, a pseudo Dakmor, and a discard outlet. So you get to find Putrid Imp and Golgari Grave Troll. And then so long as you have something to just get the chain rolling, you can use your Golgari Grave Troll to do a dredge tutor technique to find your Dakmor. And that is something you don't actually need. So that's like 5 CMC total there. And I think that's something I'd rather play than Underrealm Lich. And currently Gerard's Orders does not see play in fully competitive Gitrog. So I think that's all that needs to be said on that front.
Yeah, TLDR, it's too fat.
Yeah, casual though, this would be, or high power, whatever, this would be a super cool card to jam into Gitrog.
But yeah, just not, it's too expensive to make a splash.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I think that wraps up this topic, and we're going to move on to our final topic, which is listener questions. And so this week we have a question from user ZWells3. Sick, do you want to give this question a read?
Sure. So Z-Wells is asking about the card Plunge into Darkness, which is a card that sees play in stuff like Paradox Scepter Thrasios, some Doomsday lists, just a lot of blue-black X stuff that's running things like Dramatic Reversal Scepter and like Bomberman and like maybe Consult Labman and stuff like that. And
he's playing in Food Chain Tazra. I don't know if you mentioned the
Food Chain
decks,
Tazra as well. Just stuff that doesn't really care about too many things getting exiled. His question is, it can be a bit unclear how much life to pay into Plunge in Darkness, because it gives you an option to pay life to turn into cards. So how do you figure out how much life to pay into Plunge in Darkness and what points in the game?
This is a pretty... something that is not necessarily intuitive when you first start playing with Plunge, right? do you go all the way and you pay down to 1 life, look at as many cards as possible, or do you try to play more conservatively because, what if you find a tutor and then you don't have to risk exiling cards? Personally, I think you just need to look at the deck construction. This isn't going into every single deck that runs Tainted Pact, or this isn't something that people are just generically running as let's say maybe a slightly better impulse, right? That you can see more cards, because many decks are reliant on multiple pieces. So, it's certainly, the decks that are running this are meant to kind of abuse it. They're meant to be able to pay more life so that you see more cards and, you find the one piece you need and then you're golden, right? You get to have if you're, let's say, Tazri, right? All you need to do is find Food Chain, and so long as you don't exile one of your four actual like ally outlet cards, you win the game, right? Because you get to find, if you hit any of your exile creatures, then you can just cast them from exile, and then it's amazing.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, it's a lot. It's pretty contextual, but I think, yeah, the general idea is that, like, if you have Plunge into Darkness in your deck, you should be prepared to take advantage of seeing so many cards and being able to pick one out of like 30 or 35 even. I think there definitely are times when you want to be conservative with it. Maybe you're only looking for a protection spell. You already have your combo in hand, and you just need to find something to protect it, a counterspell, a silence, something like that. Or maybe you're already on low life and you just need to find an answer to something. Then you don't necessarily
if
need
you're
to
trying to
dig
find
that
a
deep.
if you're trying to find a counterspell and to someone's thing, and you've only got mana for the counterspell, you don't want to hit your Food Chain or whatever combo piece you're trying to find, right? Because you're just trying to find that answer, and if you see that Food Chain, you're going to be forced to take it. So that's definitely a time when you'd want to be more conservative. But otherwise, I think it's pretty much, the decks are built to go balls to the walls on that card if you're trying to win the game that turn.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Anybody else have an opinion on it?
No, I think that pretty much covers it.
I think there's one case that wasn't mentioned that kind of serves two functions in your Food Chain decks, right? It can exile your outlets, and it can also search for a combo piece.
Yeah. Just having the ability to, like, even if you already have Food Chain in hand, go and dig deep to get a cast from exile creature into exile can be pretty powerful as well.
Okay, so with that answered, we'll wrap it up. Close out the podcast. So this is obviously our first pilot episode, so we'd love to hear feedback on what people think. We've got a Discord that we'll link with in the show notes of the podcast. So this is where we're going to go collect listener questions from now on. So join the Discord if you just want to chat with us or chat with anyone else in the community, and then post your questions. And I think that's about it, unless anyone wants to add anything else.
Yeah, make sure to check out the subreddit. Great subreddit. Check out the CDH Discord. You got a great team of mentors, great community. If you're just getting into the game, or if you're looking to play some more games, got a great rank setup for playing online with cockatrice. Make sure to check out cEDH. Got great setup there for playing games over webcam. Totally proxy friendly. Great for that. They got great mod team over there as well. Good community. Yeah.
And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click that bell so you get notified when we do a new episode.
Yeah, man. Check out the Patreon. Yada, yada, yada.
Also, please suggest any future topics you want us to cover. Just in the Discord or the Reddit post or wherever you guys find this, and we'll try to take that into account when we're working on our next episode, which hopefully should be released in a month from now. Okay. See ya.
See ya.
See ya.
See ya.